Welcome everyone, I am Brenda Radido and this is Africa Matters. Nearly 3 million children in West and Central Africa have been locked out of schools due to escalating conflict and they risk recruitment, exploitation and abuse by armed groups. We delve into the findings of this latest Norwegian Refugee Council report. And it's a bleak global picture as well. About 1 in 6 children on the planet is living in a conflict zone. That's anywhere within a 50-kilometer radius of armed violence. That's about 468 million children globally scarred by war and conflict, according to research by the Peace Research Institute Oslo and Save the Children. Now, these children are more likely to be killed or injured by bombs or bullets, recruited by armed groups, or exposed to sexual violence. They often don't have enough to eat and they witness the horrors of war as their homes, schools and hospitals are reduced to rubble. Now, the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo has been described as one of the worst places in the world to be a child. And since the beginning of this year, more than 1,400 schools have remained closed due to inter-community tensions and violence affecting over 500,000 students and nearly 13,000 teachers. However, it's a different story in Burkina Faso, where 1,300 schools located in government-controlled areas were reopened between October last year and June this year. Likewise, attacks on schools reduced in Mali and the Central African Republic because of a decline in violence in some parts of the country. And last year, about 1.5 million children in Cameroon couldn't get a basic education due to conflict. Arison Tamfu traveled to Buea, which is in the English-speaking region of Cameroon, where most children won't be returning to class.
Deserted streets, empty schoolyards, and abandoned classrooms in the English-speaking regions of Cameroon. Separatists have imposed weeks of lockdown where they want to create an independent nation. On this school campus, students like Ayum Allen want to study, but they can't.
I know that at least through football, I can have something to do or to keep myself busy and to do something which can only help me in future. I'm supposed to be around at year 2 or year 3 at university, but because of the lockdown which has been stopping, that's what has been making me to.
Education establishments have been a prime target for breakaway groups, enraged by what they see as education injustice in the majority French-speaking country. They don't approve of the French system of education. Thousands of schools in the conflict zone have long shut down, forcing students to stay home all day or do odd jobs to survive. This school has suffered years of intimidation and attacks by gunmen. It is one of over 2,000 schools that have been forced to shut down due to an increase in violence since the war began in 2017. Close to 500,000 children have missed out on education since then. Many parents feel a sense of despair as illiteracy poses a threat to an entire generation of young Cameroonians here.
We have seen a spike in the rate of drug. The rate of young people who get into drug addiction. We have also seen an increase in the rate of promiscuity and prostitution because these children do not go to school. They are vulnerable to being recruited into the non-state armed group.
Despite the war, many children are still desperate to learn, but they want the environment to be safe.
Education shouldn't be used as a bargaining chip by any of the group. They need to end this war. A genuine dialogue is the only solution to end this crisis.
Until then, the universal right to learn and grow for children like Alain remains elusive. Arison Tamfu, Africa Matters, Buea, Cameroon.
Let's hear more from Leandro Salazar. He's the Regional Education Advisor for Central and West Africa Regional Office, Norwegian Refugee Council. He joins me from Jamina, Chad. Thank you for talking to us here on Africa Matters. How are children in Chad and other African countries affected when they can't go or return to school based on what you've seen?
Yes, thank you for having me. The situation is dire. More than 14,000 schools have been forced to close as a result of violence and insecurity. And this is based on the data we have collected as of June 2024. This, of course, impacts the education of hundreds of children across the Central and West Africa region. Countries like Burkina Faso, Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, for example, have been particularly affected. The closure of schools not only deprives children of education, but also exposes them to severe protection risks, such as the recruitment into armed groups, sexual violence, and also physical exploitation. And of course, the list of protections goes on and on. And this is across the Central and West Africa region, because the schools are being deliberately targeted. As part of broader conflict in the region, armed groups are also using schools for military purposes. They are also deliberately attacking these schools, including teachers and children, attacking them as a symbol, because according to these groups, they represent a symbol of government authority. And this is just an example of many more reasons schools have been attacked by armed groups. Sorry.
And Salaza, you often hear about a lost generation. So, a follow-up question would be during and after, the future of these children, do they ever come back to school?
Yes, actually, despite the alarming situation and the alarming numbers that we have shared with all of you in the report, there are signs of progress in some areas. For example, in Mali and the Central African Republic, the number of attacks on education decreased between 2022 and 2023 due to reduced violence in these regions. In Burkina Faso, for example, and just to give you a concrete example, around 1,300 schools have reopened this year in areas under government control, allowing thousands of children to return to school. This demonstrates, of course, the positive change. That positive change is possible if concerted efforts are made to prioritize education.
Right. So what makes, from where you sit, what makes a school such a prime target for armed groups in Africa? And is it different from other parts of the world?
It is actually different in other parts of the world and also between countries. The reasons are diverse. The schools are being deliberately targeted as part, as I mentioned, of a broader conflict in the regions. But for instance, in the Central Sahel region, let's talk about Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, the schools are being attacked as because they represent interests that go against this particular interest, ideological interest of these armed groups that are reluctant to keep schools open because, of course, they have a different ideology of what they want to promote in these specific regions of these countries.
So, Salaza, sorry for cutting you short, but when you're talking about the ideologies of these rebel groups or the armed forces, let's have a look at the kidnappings that have happened in Nigeria. It was more related to the education system. They're talking about the Western education system that they do not agree with.
For countries like Nigeria, as you mentioned, there's this reluctance from armed groups, non-state armed groups, to force schools to close, as they represent, as you mentioned, this Western education. And they are, of course, aiming to introduce other modalities for education.
So now, education is hardly a priority when it comes to aid response. So are any African governments and the aid organizations getting it right, and what needs to change?
Actually, there are several actions that have been taken into consideration, also been conducted. First of all, as NRC and as Regional Education Emergency Working Group, we're calling on all parties to adhere to international laws that protect schools from being attacked and used as military bases. And also governments and international organizations need to provide safe spaces for children to learn, such as temporary learning centers in displacement camps, the camps that are hosting these children and families that have been forced to flee these territories where armed groups are present. And also, we are calling for sustained investment in education, because this is crucial to rebuild schools and provide the necessary resources like teachers and materials in conflict-affected areas.
Right, Leandro Salaza, the Regional Education Advisor for Central and West Africa Regional Office, Norwegian Refugee Council. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Matters. And still to come here on Africa Matters.
I am Palum David in Kano State with the story of how textile industry in Nigeria are struggling for survival.
Urbanization is on the rise in Africa, but increasing populations have left major cities with a holistic problem of climate change. I am Darren Alan Cheine at an annual car-free day in central Uganda, which seeks to make Kampala cleaner.
To Nigeria now, where the Borno State governor says severe flooding in the northeastern city of Maiduguri has affected 1 million people. A dam collapse left about 40% of the city underwater and officials scrambling to rescue residents. Timothy Obiezu has more from there.
Sheer desperation as more than 14,000 people in this camp scramble for survival. They were forced to flee their homes after heavy rains broke a major dam in Borno on Tuesday, causing it to spill its waters into the city. Authorities say dozens of people have died and up to 1 million others have been seriously affected.
We are overwhelmed, but the government is on its toes. NEMA is on board, SEMA is on board, technical partners are on board, well-meaning individuals are on board.
The government has set up 10 camps like this around Maiduguri to respond to the emergency and announced plans to open new centers as more people arrive to safety. 70-year-old Mariam Malamodu and her sister survived the floods by a whisker and arrived here 2 days ago. But they're still yet to get food and a place to rest.
When the flood came, we couldn't even run to save ourselves. But thanks to good people who helped us, we made it to the government's rescue vehicle and were brought here. But now we don't have food or shelter. I've been sleeping on the floor.
Borno State has already crippled by years of conflict that have caused one of the biggest humanitarian crises in the world. The crisis has been made worse by severe food shortages and spiraling inflation. The floods have now taken the suffering to a whole new level, and many blame authorities for negligence.
It was only 2 years ago that Nigeria's worst flooding in a decade killed more than 600 people. Many say the government ignored warning signs of the potential danger at the dam. On Wednesday, Borno State Governor visited the camps and donated relief materials. Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has also approved the release of $1.8 million in disaster funds. The United Nations Humanitarian Agency has called for support to help manage the crisis, and for millions of Nigerians, the relief cannot come soon enough.
Timothy Obiezu, Africa Matters, Maiduguri, Borno State, Nigeria.
The collapse of the Alo Dam in Nigeria's Borno has caused some of the state's worst flooding since the same dam collapsed 30 years ago. Local government officials say the dam was at the full capacity due to unusual heavy rains, but it's the latest catastrophe to hit the continent, begging the question, were they natural or preventable disasters? Grace Kuria Kanja finds out.
Just hours after Borno State residents had been placed on high alert, thousands of people were caught up in the floods when Nigeria's Alau Dam burst its banks. The state governor says about 40% of the city is now underwater.
I told my husband that we should leave with our children, but he said it wouldn't reach us. Before we knew it, the water had covered our house.
But this is not the first time Alau Dam has collapsed. 30 years ago, a similar dam failure occurred, submerging almost half the city.
The point is adaptation. We go the way of adaptation. We see what we can mitigate. We identify what we have not been experiencing and develop means and ways on how to adapt with that one, because the climate change is here with us.
This year has seen several dams across the continent overflow and wreaking havoc. Sudan, for instance, has been facing war, famine, displacement, and now flooding. In August, floods overwhelmed Arbat Dam in the northeast, wiping out 20 villages and leaving at least 60 people dead, according to local media reports.
The situation is catastrophic, to be honest. We have children, families, the elderly, and others that need continuous medication.
A makeshift dam in Kenya's Rift Valley region also broke its banks in April, leaving at least 46 dead.
Dams do have a spillway, which facilitates now excess water discharge to the normal river flow. So for the one in Kenya, I do understand that it didn't have the spillway. And that's why when the excess water came, there was that now burst of the dam affecting communities downstream.
And Libya is marking 1 year since the tragic loss of over 4,000 lives. Storm Daniel hit the Libyan east coast, causing flooding, resulting in the bursting of 2 dams. The people blamed authorities for not issuing timely evacuation orders to Dana residents.
They are supposed to release like 6 months period so that so that their action plans for evacuation can be drawn up, and as the situation worsens during that time, the government will have now adequate mechanism to evacuate the people from their floodplains.
Chad, Morocco, Algeria, Mali and Niger are experiencing heavy rains, and scientists warn that African countries may have to pay more for the loss and damage every year because of a changing climate. Grace Kuriakanja, Africa Matters.
And staying in Nigeria, we now focus on the textile industry, which is battling for survival. A generation ago, it was a dominant force in the economy. But today, 90% of the textile products in Nigeria are imported. Campaigners blame the government for allowing foreign producers to undercut the local market. Palum David reports from Kano State, one of Nigeria's main industrial hubs.
This is Tofa Textiles, one of the few surviving factories in Kano State. Here, they make blankets. But in the 70s, 80s and 90s, the textile industry was one of the biggest employers in Nigeria.
The whole chain of textile industry, from the cotton farming to the ginneries to the spinners to the weaving it's a whole change. There is no sector in the country that can employ people like the textile industry.
The textile industry has all but collapsed in Kano State. Only 3 major producers are managing to survive, as 90% of textile products in Nigerian markets today are imported.
I produce blanket, and my cost of production will be around 3,000 to 4,000 naira, while someone is bringing that same blanket and selling it here in the market at 2,000 naira, half of my cost of production. How can I compete with that?
These challenges have led to the shutdown of many textile businesses.
This is the former company we work.
And workers such as Adamu Ali are now left without a job after spending 14 years in the industry.
My former textile company, Territories, that I'm working, we are over 200 plus when we are working. But now there is nobody since the company has been closed. Many of our workers, they have due to the failure of the company, they lose hope. Some of them, they are late. Some of them, they paralyze. You know, like me, after I left the textile, I really suffer a lot.
Decline of the textile industry has worsened Nigeria's unemployment rate. Experts say reviving it would not only create millions of jobs, but also help reduce billions of dollars spent each year on imports.
Formerly here in Kano, if you go around, you see how youths are working. So they don't have time for insecurity, but now everybody is sitting at home. The industries are closing. They are packing away to our neighboring countries. So we are appealing to the government to come in and see how they can salvage the situation.
Nigerian authorities say they have secured $3.5 billion in investments to revive the country's textile sector. But experts say much more needs to be done. Palum David, Africa Matters, Kano.
Like many other major cities, Uganda's capital heavily relies on road transport to carry its ever-growing population. But Kampala is pushing for a behavioral change in transport in order to improve its air quality. Darren Alan Cheyune attended Kampala's Car-Free Day and brings us this report from Uganda's capital, Kampala.
Brenda Narubowa is a regular road user, but today her route is unusually quiet. And this travel consultant is happy to vlog her unfamiliar journey to work.
It's really good because you can walk freely no congestion. You know, Kampala is really so chaotic and congestion with these motorbikes. So if it's like this, it's really so spacious. You can walk, you can actually feel yourself, you know.
Like Brenda, over 3 million people rely on road transport to travel to and from Kampala every day. And at least 25,000 vehicles enter this city daily. Most of them are 15 years or older, which accelerates climate change. But Kampala Capital City Authority is trying to send a different message with this annual car-free day.
These are some of the efforts we are taking to ensure that we reduce emissions, we create awareness, and people get an understanding that yes, it is possible to move through the city without a vehicle. It is possible to cycle through the city. As we also partake other measures like tree planting, like greening of our spaces, and increasing the amount of plants, the amount of those issues or those phenomena that can help us tone down the pollution in the city.
Most roads like this in Kampala are designed for motorists, but today they are open to other forms of transport and events like this.
Uganda's Environmental Authority says Kampala's air quality is 8 times higher than recommended standard of 5 micrograms per cubic meter set by the World Health Organization. Air quality monitors say that with more monthly car-free days, Kampala could breathe a little easier.
Generally, you get to see better air quality. We did experience such during COVID lockdown in Uganda. Almost a big number of vehicles were grounded, so you didn't have a lot of pollution from the vehicles. Our air quality changed drastically, went to green, if I can say, went to acceptable levels, very good levels.
Kampala has just over 600 kilometers of paved road. The government is working to pave at least 60% of its 2,100 kilometers of road when funding is available. It also aims to reduce dust and build new lanes that are safer for walking and cycling. Darren Alan Cheyune, Africa Matters, Kampala, Central Uganda.
The recent killing of Ugandan Olympian athlete Rebecca Cheptegei has sparked fury about femicide in Kenya. It's also revived calls for stronger action against domestic violence. For some, it's deeply personal, and her tragic death brought back memories they would rather forget. Melinda Nusifora has the story.
She lives with the painful reminder of what she went through in what was supposed to be a happy marriage.
If I could turn back time to when he began threatening to kill me, I would leave immediately. I wouldn't wait. But now I regret because it's too late. What is done is done. I have lost my fingers and eye. There's nothing much I can do now.
She got married to a 22-year-old man when she was only 15. She says he would constantly attack and threaten to kill her, along with their 3 children. Just when she thought she'd dealt with her past, news of Rebecca's murder by her ex-boyfriend triggered her own trauma.
I felt so much pain when I came to learn about that story. I even lost sleep. I counted myself very lucky because at least I'm still alive and my children can still see me. She wasn't so lucky because she is dead now. I feel so sorry for the women who are enduring what I experienced.
About 1 in 3 women in Kenya has experienced physical violence from the age of 15, government data shows.
Femicide has been rampant in this country. I remember in the beginning of this year, on 27th of January, as Kenyans and as Kenyan women, and thank God for the Kenyan public as well, we did a femicide march on 27th of January where we were demanding for the government to speak about and also act upon incidents of femicide. By that time, we had 32 cases of dead women in 1 month.
Advocacy groups say that as long as gender-based violence is seen as normal, laws criminalising it will mean nothing.
Kenya is not short of commitments or not short of legislation about gender-based violence. We have the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act that was passed in 2015, but up to now, we do not have it operationalized.
In 2022, UN Women says about 20,000 women and girls were intentionally killed across Africa, making it the highest number of reported femicides globally. Atieno and many other survivors may never get justice, but they are hoping for a fresh start. Melinda Nusafora, Africa Matters.
That's our show this week. Share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode or ideas on what you'd like us to cover on YouTube or on X using the hashtag Africa Matters. Thanks for watching. It's goodbye from me, Brenda Radido.